Good morning and welcome. I'm Jeremy Strick, Director of the Nasher Sculpture Center. Thank you to Director Amy Hoffland and our friends here at the Crow Collection of Asian Art for so generously hosting us today. I'm delighted to welcome you to this Nasher Prize Dialogues Conversation, the first in-person panel discussion in this series in nearly 3 years. And I must say, we've gathered quite a group for it. Korean-born, New York-based architect and designer Minjae Kim, Los Angeles-based designer and artist Peter Shire, Brooklyn-based designer and artist Katie Stout, an American, Mexico City-based writer and curator Sue Wu. And in full coming together of the Dallas Arts District family, the conversation will be moderated by Sarah Schleuning, the Margot B. Perot Senior Curator of Decorative Arts and Design at the Dallas Museum of Art. Today's talk, The Uncanny Politics of Objects, takes inspiration from our 2022 Nasher Prize laureate, Nairy Baghramian, and her interest in the politics embedded within both sculpture and design objects. Much of Baghramian's work creates or alters space with sculptural forms that, alongside strong references to the human body, pull from the visual catalog of design, furniture, curtains, rugs, and challenge us to negotiate with architecture, our bodies, and social structures, eliciting responses that range from awe to awkwardness. Her interest in the binaries of interior-exterior, private-public, process production, feminine-masculine are at the heart of this work, as is a desire to set objects free from the confines of category. One example of this was the 2019 exhibition Work Desk for an Ambassador's Wife at Marion Goodman Gallery in New York, a culmination of Baghramian's years-long collaboration with the late Swiss-French designer and artist Jeannette Laverrière, who died in 2011 at 102. For it, the artist displayed some of her own sculpture alongside Laverrière's designs, as our Nasher curators noted in their essay on Baghramian, inspired by Laverrière's renunciation of useful objects in her own designs. Baghramian included maquettes, drawings, and sketches from her own series Side Leaps of works never intended to be realized. Having no function or purpose, these are works which, in Baghramian's words, have not been allowed to become sculptures. Showing these unrealized works from 1999 to 2019 was a way for the artist to examine the relationships between beauty and the feminine, productivity, use values, and the dysfunctional. While today's talk will not be about Baghramian's practice per se, we hope to expand upon these ideas of productivity, use value, and dysfunction, and so have gathered a panel of curators and designers who have all, to varying degrees and in different directions, pushed against any prescribed cultural or social categories for the objects they make or at which they point. As such, they wear many hats, breaking from any paradigm of following a straight career path, instead maintaining multi-hyphenate practices. Shared among their respective practices is a degree of dissent against the market, against art historical and design rubrics, against normalized beauty and rote modes of production, and more than anything, against expectation. I so look forward to hearing how they surprise us today. Before we begin, I want to thank our Nasher Prize supporters, especially our chairs, Nancy Carlson and Adriana Perales, for their tireless help in raising awareness and support for it, alongside Nasher Prize Month sponsors, Nancy A. Nasher and David J. Hemesegger, Nasher Prize jewelry sponsor, the Eugene McDermott Foundation, presenting media sponsor, Belo Media Group, Dialogues media partner, Wallpaper, media partners, KERA's Art and Seek and Paper City, Nasher Prize Education and Community Program sponsors, the Donna Wilhelm Family Fund and Gagosian. And lastly, our dedicated Nasher Prize Dialogue sponsors, Bowden Family Foundation, Michael Corman and Kevin Fink, Heartland and Mackey Family, Marion Goodman Gallery, Janelle and Alden Pinnell, Pinnell Foundation, Stephen Friedman Gallery, and Patricia J. Villarreal and Thomas S. Leatherbury. Steering our conversation today is Sarah Schleuning, the Margot B. Perot Senior Curator of Decorative Arts and Design at the Dallas Museum of Art. Sarah is dedicated to presenting and promoting the power and impact of design to the public through exhibitions, publications, and lectures. Her recent and upcoming shows and publications include Cartier and Islamic Art in Search of Modernity, Electrifying Design, A Century of Lighting, Curbed Vanity, a contemporary foil by Chris Schank, as well as Dior and Iris van Herpen, Transforming Fashion, and Dream Cars, Innovative Design, Visionary Ideas. Schleuning is focused on strengthening the DMA's collection specifically in 20th and 21st century design. This has included key acquisitions and exhibitions that explore the intersections between art and design, handcraft and technology, and innovation and making. Prior to her role at the DMA, Schleuning served as Curator of Decorative Arts and Design at the High Museum of Art Atlanta from 2011 to 2018. She has also held curatorial positions at the Wolfsonian Florida International University and the Cranbrook Art Museum. So please join me in welcoming Minjae Kim, Peter Shire, Katie Stout, Sue Wu, and Sarah Schleuning.
Practiced that a lot, you can tell. So I'm really honored to be here. This is, when I came to Dallas 4 years ago, it's really been so warm and embracing the kind of community of arts and the idea that arts encompasses everything, that there are no limits between what is an artistic idea or an intentionality. And I think that's part of what we're here to talk about today. So I really want to thank Jeremy, Lucia, the Nasher Prize, everyone for including us and inviting us to be co-conspirators and idea generators here today. I also want to thank Nari and her collaborator Jeanette for actually being a springboard of an idea for us to discuss. I think in order to get into the meat, because what I want to hear is what these people have to say and the ideas and visuals that they have to share, I'm going to keep the intros very light, although I'm embarrassed that mine was very long, so sorry about that. But I trust that you will want to learn more about these people. They all have many articles, many publications, many things you can learn more about them, including also just talking to them themselves. So let me just go down the row and give you just a brief, what I would call the bullet points of their renegadeness. Sue Wu is a writer and curator based in Mexico City. She's the art editor of Journal N+1, and her most recent project is the exhibition Elementos Vitalis and Mendienta in Oaxaca. Minjae Kim, next to her, a Korean artist based in New York, whose focus in architecture and the design acts antithetically to the restrictions of architectural practice as it relates to time, scale, and accessibility, which I'm dying to see what that means. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot there. We have Katie Stout, a New York-based artist. She's an instigator in revitalizing the use of ceramics. She refuses, as you will find, to define her works in categories of high and low or art and design. And lastly, we have Peter Shire, who's an LA-based artist, our most colorful member today, whose work from ceramics to public sculptures both references and parodies movements such as Bauhaus, Futurism, and Art Nouveau. And though he is known as a founding member of the Memphis Design Group, that is only a facet of his tremendous art production that eludes all categorization. So I'm thrilled to have all of them come speak. I will tell you what I gave them as their assignment in this talk was to present 2 ideas in the sort of 7+ minutes they have to talk. One is a project or work that defines this undefinable boundary, that talks about that space between disciplines or the refusal to be categorized at all. and another was a project or an idea that they most wanted to do. Now, whether they fulfilled those assignments is up to them, and so we shall see. So we will start with Sue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Wu. I am a writer and curator based in Mexico City. And I remember when I was first starting out, I went to this arts writers conference at the Walker. And I think it was supposed to be an annual thing, but it was just such a group of maladjusted people that only happened once. But I remember Christopher Knight of the LA Times telling the story about how he was talking to an artist once, and the artist said, well, if it wasn't for artists, you would have nothing to write about. And Christopher Knight, Pulitzer Prize winning Christopher Knight's response was, well, no, I would just write about why artists don't exist. And it's something that I've carried with me ever since, this important reminder that no artist or designer ever really needed a writer to make their work. Or at least they shouldn't, right? Like that maybe as a curator, you create like the space or the means for an idea to be reified in the world. But generally speaking, I'm a tertiary to the main event. And I think that's a really lucky place to be. There's this great Rancière quote about how in every logic of emancipation, there has to be a third thing. And I feel like for myself, in sort of looking for that separate reason to exist, that third thing, I've been very fortunate to find myself in this space between design and art. And in particular, what has interested me is this commonplace, that when you ask people what the distinction is between design and art, they will very often point to use. And so what I try to do in every project, if I'm lucky and able, is to emphasize that even in design objects, or especially in design objects, that use is not a baked in or essential quality. That of course use is constantly being defined and redefined by our relationships to one another, by how we are needed, by how we can be of service. This is something that came up once, I remember, in this conversation with a machine learning expert. So we were talking about CAPTCHAs, right? These visuals that when you're logging into a website, you have to identify all the trains or identify all the bridges. And he almost as a throwaway said, well, for a long time, the default image that we use for machines is a picture of a living room. And it's very hard for the machine to identify a chair because, of course, you can sit on almost anything. Something I come back to. I feel like I really do want to say also before I start that, and I'm willing to be wrong, but I do think that there is a distinction among design and craft and art. But at least for me, it has been in the space of frustrated utility, of ambiguous use, of even sheer laziness, that design and art tend to bump up against one another and enter this space where our knowledge and our ignorance meet, turning one into the other. So I want to talk about some projects that I've done. So when I first moved to Mexico City, this is an image of Masa. It was a new exhibition platform and gallery, and I was asked to curate their inaugural show of Mexican design. And we just immediately sort of set out to undermine the premise. So it's a project that was founded by Roberto Diaz-Sasma, who I know is part of the Nasher family, Isaac Bisou, Hector Ezraoui, who's a Lebanese-Mexican designer, and then my co-curator, Constanza Garza, but then also some immigrants to Mexico. So the Armenian-American designer Brian Thurin, and Age Salaho, who's from Estonia. And so as new immigrants to Mexico, we were really interested in this long history of what it can mean to define a place through a shared longing and shared affinity rather than strict citizenship and borders. And so we set out to look for work that had been made by artists who had also sought something in Mexico. We showed an Encore, a date painting that he made in Mexico in 1968, which is a really significant year in Mexican history. A Leonora Carrington painting. She, of course, was helped by Andre Breton and the Mexican ambassador to leave Europe after World War II and went to Mexico, where she spent the rest of her life. We got permission from Breton's daughter to reprint the first manifesto of international revolutionary art, which she co-wrote with Diego Rivera, so there was a stack of them in the exhibition space. Allen Ginsberg's estate gave us an unpublished recording of Ginsberg reading all of Jack Kerouac's Mexico City Blues, which we played in the bathroom. So just really, really thinking about, I mean, I guess in retrospect that it was a show about friendship, and how that can come to define what a place can be and how optimistic we were, that we could create a new sense of place. And then on the design front, sort of thinking about how to undermine design. I guess the next slide. We wanted to show work that was of ambiguous utility, or just, I mean, maybe even the next one would work for this. That was, in the last slide, there was a work by Pedro Reyes. These are works by Jose Davila, Alma Allen, and Francis Alice. And just thinking about, and the Francis Alice piece is lifting the floor to put on my shoes. And I just remember there being so much explaining that we had to do about showing art and design together in this dilapidated old mansion that had been the site of a famous double murder, and like daring to call it an exhibition. And so even in this small way, it felt like this little proof that art and design could be in conversation with one another without that being the explicit topic, and that no one's career would be ruined. But it was the most recent Masa exhibition, so the next. Oh, sorry, and then this is another Masa exhibition. This is a piece by Tania Perez Cordova, who's a Mexican artist. I love this piece. So in every exhibition she takes a pane of glass from the exhibition space, and in this small gesture bends it, and it becomes a completely different use. The object takes on a completely different use. So also she looks for a person who's affiliated with the exhibition, and this becomes a portrait of them. So this is a string of broken pearls. And there was another one that I just loved, and it held a little puddle of window cleaner. And that was also in the exhibition. It was this one, yes.
Okay.
Hooray, thank you.
For teamwork.
No, thank you. This was the most recent Masa exhibition that we did. And this one was for me, to your prompt. I don't think that everything has to be a reconciliation to be valuable, but this to me felt like the closest that I've been lucky enough to come to this reconciliation of an idea, that a design exhibition doesn't need to be about necessarily design history or about use per se, but that design can be capacious enough to encompass other ideas. So this was a show of the work of Ana Mendienta, the late great Cuban-American artist, who was sent by her father when she was 11 to live in the United States, where she grew up in group homes and foster care. And she didn't return to a Spanish-speaking country until she was a student at the University of Iowa. And then she would spend every summer in Oaxaca from 1973 to 1980 and made some of the most significant works of her life while there, including the first Silhouette film work. But they had never before been shown in Oaxaca. So we were so honored to be trusted by her estate to bring these works back to the place where they were made. And I see that exhibition, right? I see the exhibition that talks about Mendieta in Mexico and that looks at Mendieta's relationship to certain similarities in rituals in Oaxaca and rituals in the Afro-Caribbean cultures. And it looks like a beautiful exhibition that I would have been deeply proud of. But that's not my third way. That's not my separate reason to exist. No? And we really wanted to think about accessibility, about vantage point, to take it seriously, about offering a place to rest when you're watching a film work and letting museum seating or exhibition seating not be an afterthought. And so we invited 5 Latina or Mexico City-based artists to make seating installations conceptual resting places from which to engage with the film works and to let each medium attempt to enhance the other. So next slide. So this is a piece by Pia Camille, who is a Valle de Bravo-based artist. And she, this is 120 pairs of blue jeans, of soft blue jeans. This piece is called Blue Jeanando. And it was paired with Mendieta's film work Burial Pyramid, which was filmed at the Yagul archaeological site. And Mendieta is buried in stones. And similarly, while you're engaging with Pia Camille's work, you're buried under this pile. You're brought low to the very ground that Mendieta had buried herself in. And that also that jeans are also a silhouette. They're also this way of sort of implying the body when the body is absent. And I'm so excited to be working with Pia on a large public installation that will go up in Rockefeller Center Plaza in May. So look for that. And then this is a piece by the Mexican architect Frida Escobedo, who was just selected to design the new contemporary and modern wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I've felt so lucky to be able to work with her on a few projects. And she responded to Mendieta's Creek, where Mendieta lays in San Felipe Creek in Oaxaca. And she was very interested in the movement of the water, in reflecting the reflectivity of the water and the sound of the metal. But also as an architect, that a lot of her practice is around how underlying structures can change human behavior. And so this possibility of taking a material that is more commonly associated with bondage, right? These are chains, and giving it a frame, and then it becomes an object of cradling, of support. And I just want to end. I don't have a slide for this, but I just wanted to end by saying I think that there is a tendency, or maybe an impulse, to talk about works that fail or that are gross or wacky in terms of a value of these non-cathartic feelings of frustration, of disgust, of surprise, right, or of novelty. And I completely agree with that, all of that, but I think that I might add that I also think that works of frustrated utility actually add a really important ethical rejoinder to notions of use. And a lot has been written about perhaps like the racist and sexist implications of wanting things that are pure or devoid of ornament. But I mean even these aspirational notions of fewer better things, right? Or as though objects that complicate our lives or are haphazard, or that are disabled, or that are broken, bad, bewildered, are just not worthy of existing, or not worthy of our care. And I think that they can become spaces of double meaning. You know, it's not that human to be good at life, you know, really. And I think that in some writings around craft and design, craft has done itself this disservice by trying to map onto notions of the well-made. And it's backed itself into this kind of sentimental or romantic illogic. And I don't think it's a self-evident thing. I don't think that, or self-evident proof. It's not that because we like things that are well-made, that things made by hand are good. No, it's not. It's not this tautology. And I'm gonna just, because I want to get into. Forgive me. No, I'm almost done. No, and I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to like implicate anyone here, but that's my last point. I think that we might all agree that there's no implicit good to things made by hand or the well-made. That, of course, terrible people can make beautiful things. So, on that note, the rest of the panel.
Is this working, right?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Minjae, and I've been having my own practice for about a year now, so it feels incredible to be here. And also to be introduced. I think I wrote that whole blurb like more than a year ago when I was kind of starting my own practice and like not really thinking anyone would really read it. And I was really, I think at the time we're still working at a design office. I worked with Giancarlo Valle for 3 years, kind of going through this, design studio practice. doing furniture, interiors, and some ground-up projects. And I think I was very frustrated with just the kind of a slow pace of architectural projects or interior projects, and really found it liberating to work at a smaller scale that allowed me to have more control in a way, because I always needed that kind of drive. So I think that's kind of what I wrote. It's a good reminder, actually, to me, because I haven't really, now that I have my practice, I'm so caught up in the like daily struggles that I kind of forgot about that. So thank you. So I'll just go through the slides. This is my most recent presentation at Frieze LA. First art fair that I participated. I worked with Marta Gallery in LA that I did my first show with, showing some work with History of Frogs, a great duo based in LA. So this was, I guess, maybe kind of suiting to the topic, because that was exactly the challenge that we were kind of facing, because Marta is predominantly a design-based gallery that was kind of more branching out to the fine arts world, and so we were kind of in the situation where it's mostly fine arts presentations and galleries, and we're like, what are we showing? Like, I'm gonna make furniture, but how do we make it more fitting? Which was a challenge, but also a great opportunity for me to kind of maybe try to be a little less practical and move away, or just like make more jokes in a way, like these nubs, or so the table was kind of a result of that. I think I can go to the next slide. I mean, I guess that's kind of like all there's to say about this table.
It speaks for itself.
Yeah, I was just, it was a fun idea to just kind of have these nubs occupy, and we could just kind of go to the next slide, and then the idea is that these little dwellings can be removed, and it was kind of a nice opportunity to like stop worrying about like where are these nubs gonna go, like how are they gonna survive daily use. I think it was kind of a big break for me, because starting so small, like I was building little projects in my basement, and I needed my friends to like commission me work to be able to make it, and then there's like huge kind of pressure of having to function, or and then the middle stage is like to sell and to be able to kind of just begin making work without having to worry too much of it. I mean, obviously it's still a concern. I think was kind of a good break for me. So what's in the next slide? So I was able to kind of explore more of like how to hide function, how to hide hardwares. This was a wall mount lamp, so I was just kind of like putting nubs on every hardware basically. Or in the next slide we have these kind of counterweight that holds balance of the lighting part, and then basically just those nubs are just additional weights, me trying to kind of balance, find like if I added more fixture on the other side, I would add a potato or a carrot, vice versa, which was fun. Next slide. And then this is kind of, I think, something that also in a similar way, when I stopped kind of working exclusively doing practical commissions, I think I was able to kind of focus more on imagery, or kind of be more okay with my inspirations, I guess. So if you go to the next slide, there was a previously made coffee table that had this same technical detail, and then just repeated, but in a kind of different context. So we can go to the next slide. And then after, like once I kind of started making this type of work, I could really focus on the imagery. So I think the next few slides are more about that. These are just kind of, internal projects really, or not even projects, they're just documentations of work before, they leave studio to go to galleries or someone's house where I'll never see them again. And so now, out of function too, but also just, I think it's kind of become an important step for me to document them. This is in my studio in Brooklyn, and then allowing me to just kind of focus on the images. So they kind of have this like secondary function for myself. I think because I just find these images kind of satisfying, I guess. Next slide. So yeah, all these work now are kind of all over the place. The cabinet was kind of inspired by ice fishing huts, images I saw, and I think it's somewhere in Europe now. But before they all left, I was able to kind of play with other objects that I have, just kind of styling. I guess it's kind of a way to say it, but also I think more, even when I was working in interior design projects, especially in this like really high-end projects, I found there were like some moments I was kind of struggling with the idea of the exclusivity of this kind of huge effort that we're putting in for this private homes, or making this type of work that almost just kind of ends up at a private space right away. I think I'm kind of finding these type of image making, and of course like how it goes on social media too, as like a kind of important part of making this type of work, because I guess that's an accessibility thing, or how one is inspired. So in a way, kind of like making these images almost like just as important, or sometimes more important than the actual physical work itself at times, which is a weird notion because so much of making work is actually a physical process. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any conclusion, but that's kind of those are the slides.
I'm a bad slide controller.
No, that's perfect.
All right, thank you. Now, see if you are welcome also to control your slides if you want to.
I'll yell at you.
Would you like to? Or?
Peter Shire. That's me.
It's Peter.
And there are a couple of questions here, which I'm going to get out. It's all over the place. Work, project, idea you most want to do, either not achieved or was altered by other factors. And mine, at the moment, is to trade a sculpture for an Aston Martin.
Okay. I don't have a slide of that.
Yeah. Yeah, boundary breaking. Well, refusal to be categorized, for example. I say project or work most defined as undefinable, boundary breaking, that space between disciplines, or the refusal to be categorized at all. Well, I look at this whole business as a quest, and that there's a moment when I thought there was something that I couldn't see, and it was around a corner, and I've been attempting to find that, and that perhaps is uncategorizable. So this is how it turned out so far. This is a model for a gateway at NoHo, North Hollywood, sort of a funny, slightly unfortunate name. But anyway, we're talking about design and art, and Henry Moore once said something to the effect of architecture people relate to, and art, relate around, and art relates to people. And there's a feeling and a conveyed, and we in our world as a industrial, post-industrial world, really get a lot of information from objects, a lot of personality, read about people, what they are, who they are, what they value, all that kind of stuff, you know. And I'm always amused by things like freeway trusses and these earthworks, because artists attempt to do that, and it's in a gallery context, and these things are huge, and nobody could match that. You know, it can be, you know, God only knows, you know, 50 million tons of earth moved to make a roadway and stuff. So this was all based on a freeway truss. It's 85 feet long and 65 feet high. So there it is in effigy. It's made out of styrofoam. Can we go? Let's go to the next.
Can we go to the next one?
There it is. That's quite a photo, huh? Biggest crane in LA. They rented the biggest, that's the biggest crane in LA. And the thing about it is it actually relates to that other question. And the story was there were a group of different contractors involved. And the electricians were really not cooperative. They just had you know, there's sort of a construction workers deal of territory where they just had to fuck with you. And I was there, and it's got these lights, and I kept saying, you can route the wires through the lights, and it won't show. They're on these projections. And this guy was just gonna fight me forever, you know, and I wasn't gonna let him. And I learned this from my father. My father had a way of negotiating. It's funny how you notice like you're like your parents. I hear myself saying stuff my mom said all the time. She had all these words. But anyway, and they come from nowhere, unbidden. So anyway, here we are, 3 in the morning. It took them an hour to lift it, and then it took 3 hours to assemble it and electrify it. And I was standing there with this electrician who had fought me tooth and nail the whole way. And they turned the lights on, and this guy went, oh, now I understand. There it is. My wife sent these photos, so I guess she liked this project. She never told me before.
Okay, we'll
It's a
keep-
wifely duty.
Oh, wait.
This is a fascination with towers. Again, these kind of structures we see all over, you know, and again, you know, talking about things we see but we don't notice, right? As Sherlock says to Watson, how many stairs up to our apartment? He says, I don't know. He says, you looked, but you didn't observe. Right? So we do that all the time. All these kind of structures. You're going to go out today. You guys are from Texas. You must have these things all over the place. That's a chair in the front. See, there's a mini version. God, I didn't know she sent these. Yeah.
It's a revelation.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's all kinds of stories with these things, and I never know how many to tell. But there's a chair I did in 1981 in Italy with a bunch of Italian guys who are just amazing, and it really expresses one of the prime drivers of my work, which is volume. And I'm always looking for, I don't know what it is. I don't know. You know, sometimes I think, I used to get this feeling, and I was just thinking about it. I don't get it that much anymore. I think I'm gonna have to figure that out, where I'd feel this feeling in my hands that was like a volume. And that was sort of the feeling of the work. And then sometimes when I'm walking on the beach, the wind will, it's for you, the wind will go in my hands, and I feel this volume. And I think it's like the spirit of my work. And so then when you look at other pieces, like when I work with wire or with planar shapes, I'm still attempting to build volumes. It's either volumes or stripes, in case you didn't notice. Here's a chandelier. And this is a group of sculptures that I did in Japan when I did a public work, all using scrap from the company that was building the big sculpture. Yeah. That's probably Katie.
That's Katie.
That's me.
Yeah.
Are we ready to transition to Katie? Okay. Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I also don't know really which slides were selected, so it'll be a surprise for both of us. Well, first of all, I guess when I boil my work down, I tend to take these sort of traditional notions of function, beauty, form, and then I try to forget everything about them and make something new. So this is one of my pieces from this recent show that I have. It's up now at Art & Company. It's a chandelier, and it's part of this larger series of work where I guess I wanted to combine glass, ceramic, and bronze, which was actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because oftentimes when you mix those materials, it can look a lot like, well, the connotations of them are so rude, Peter.
When it was his own, it was
Such
fine.
a rapscallion, yeah. But yeah, so I was sort of playing with notions of beauty. And if you know any of my other work, I think that this sort of is the most beautiful and elegant pieces I've ever made. They're usually a lot more crude, but as you get closer to it, yes, and this is another one, as you get closer, you can see sort of all of these imperfections and crude ways of cutting the metal apart, and these sort of bugs and yeah, I guess imperfections. And I'm also this is a cabinet that I have such complicated feelings about it because it took 4 years to make, and in those 4 years, so much has changed, so it really feels like a time capsule, and I can't help but, I keep thinking about Mike Kelly's memory ware when I look at this now, just because each one feels each little ceramic and glass piece feels so imbued with, I don't know, memory. There's a lady made out of glass.
Do you want to stay with her a little bit, or you?
No, we can move on. This is a shelf that I don't even want to talk about this one.
Let's move on.
All right, here's an installation shot of the show. As you can see, more bronze and glass. Mm-hmm.
We've seen
Next.
this again.
All right,
Okay.
keep going. Oh my God, okay. I really should have been more involved with the selection of the photos. Lesson learned. So, here is a lady lamp. This is a good sort of jumping off point. One of the things that I feel I'm sort of known for are these ceramic ladies that are holding lampshades, and they're all sort of life-size, around 6 feet tall. I started off making them sort of in a pinch pot technique, so they occupy a lot of volume, really pinchy, and it's more of a caricature of a lady. And then from there, I started to think about, imagery that we relate to femininity, and so I was thinking of fruits, flowers, and that kind of motif. And I went full Archambaldo and put them together into a lamp. And these lamps, you have to touch her nipple to turn her on, and it's this 3-phase switch. So you tap it, and it gets brighter and brighter, and then it turns off. And someone once, I had this big installation of 6 lamps at Design Miami one year, And one person commented that it was thinly veiled sexism. And I was like, no, it's like not veiled at all. Like, that's the whole point. It's totally sexist. So,
Okay,
there she is again.
we see what else we have here.
These are, this is like another, I really love exploring different techniques and ways of making things. So a lot of people are like, well, that one looks different. And it's like slabs of colored clay that I roll out, and I make these like paper patterns. And I sort of just like free form various pieces of furniture as I'm making them, and it's like very automatic. And I kind of feel like this kind of process, like everything is so textured and like so ornamented and so like sort of seething that sometimes I feel like my brain needs a little like break. So I kind of feel like in my mind they're like punctuations, and I'll use like scrap colored clay and sort of almost like quilt them together. It's how I think of them. Next. Oh yes, here we go. This is my granny clock. And it's like a fully functional, I guess like frustratingly functional. I like that term a lot. Functional clock. And I really I've started to really love clocks. I don't know if it's because time has been weird recently, but it started with this Cuckoo clock commission, which I have no idea if there's an image of it, probably not. But I bought this like Black Forest cuckoo clock, and I was like, oh, this will be easy. I'll just like take the pieces apart, remake them out of clay. 2 seconds. And it took me like 2 months. There was like so much fiddling. It's so detailed and mechanical. You change one thing, it affects the other. And it was definitely like type 2 fun, where at the end I was like, that was so rewarding, but the process was tedious. And so I decided to make another clock. And I really like the tension of the way that they're made, like the pinch of the clay and like the weight versus the like precise mechanism. So you have to like, those weights are fully functional. You have to like pull them up to keep the clock running. Yeah. This is a chandelier or a pendant. This is one of my favorite ways of making things. I'll make a form out of paper clay, and then I have like boxes and boxes and boxes of like all of these ceramic pieces that I've either broken or I didn't have a use for. So they're like flowers, ladies, fruits, whatever, like just, I guess, like tchotchkes, and they're all sort of organized in my studio, and I go shopping, and I'll like make this form and then jab it with all of my scraps. And it's, oh yes, okay. So the project that is not yet realized. Wait, what's the next slide? What's the next slide? Okay. Is there another slide?
No.
No, okay. Let me go back.
Where do you want me to go?
Okay, so wait, go forward. So these are models for, I call them Pepita sofas, because I made this sofa that, like years ago, that was this like reclining lady, and she's giant. She's like 11 feet long, a reclining nude, and I wish there was a photo, but she just looks like a giant stuffed animal that was like found in a basement. And I'm going to make more of them, and these were ceramic models. So just imagine that, upholstered and giant. All right, that's in your head. Now go back. Go back again. All right, so this project is just like a total sort of, just something I want to do for myself. I think, I've been making work for like 10 years, and I've had like an overhead to pay, and I've had to make work just to make, not just to make money, but I had to make money to like, whatever, meet all of these financial requirements. And I'm ready for a little break. So I just bought this church in upstate New York where I'm moving my studio at the end of the month. So I won't be in Brooklyn anymore, I'll be in Germantown. And the church has all these pews in it, and I want to do something with them. And I was like, oh, I'm going to turn them all into pepitas, like these pepita sofas. And yeah, I'm going to like cut into them and just transform all of them into these reclining nudes. And that is a drawing of it, and that's what you're looking at.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was really, okay, so now how do I thread this all together? Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about why all of you were talking about is because I do think functionality is always something that people talk about as design objects. And in the museum context, you think about them in terms of interaction, right? Things are made, they are signifiers of object, they are, like Peter, as you said, they are signifiers of who you are, how you want to be perceived, and how people perceive you. Those are the kind of objects we typically consume. And then when we show them, we talk about not only their function, their aesthetics, their intent, their materiality, all those ideas, but also what is the role of interaction with them? So, right, how do you turn the light on? How would you sit on this thing? How would you use this teapot? And does that matter? So I think that's one of the things I would wonder for all of you when you're making that, how much you think about those ideas. Because for me, in the museum context, it doesn't actually have to function once it comes into the museum. It just has to hint at that function to put it within the collection of design.
I mean, I think that's the central contradiction of putting design in certain exhibition contexts, right? That if it is something that is over-reliant on the idea of use or function, that simply by putting it into an exhibition, it becomes an item of disuse. It becomes an artifact, right? It's no longer what the artist or what the designer had intended for it to be. And so that's what I mean, that I think that in certain contexts, design might benefit from finding another over-reliance.
Well, it takes a different function. Function has different aspects. Some things can express status, that's a function, for instance.
Yeah, like a Tiffany tea service, both functions as a tea service, but it's a signifier of wealth.
But maybe things move through too, because I see a group of people that are much younger than me, as I once was, and they're moving up as I'm moving out. And these things maybe go to museums and make room. We're always talking about making room for people too.
We just make bigger storerooms.
I know that's the fear of every artist. Where's my piece?
I mean, I think it can be a signifier of wealth, but it's an implied signifier. It no longer is associated with any person for whom it signifies that wealth. No, it's like, and I think that, like thinking about your project, Katie, where it's like this, when I say that I think there's a distinction between design and art, there is something where if presented in a certain way, design still allows for that interactivity. It like implies that you can test your body against it, that you can like put your weight on it, which is something that art still only really does by invitation. That it's like, so there are possibilities for all of these contexts of showing design where you really just get up in it.
I agree. I had a piece in a show once, and I described it as a shelf, and then the people got there to take it away, and they were like, this is not a shelf. This is a sculpture of a shelf, and we will need to come back and pack it differently, because it's true, like you couldn't really move it the way you would have moved a normal shelf. And I do think that, I agree that sometimes those like expectations are significant or like important.
I think for me, I mean, one of the things I think about is that we, like in the design world, we're not really in the canon. And so we can write our own script. Like we don't really have to be defined by anyone else's markers but our own. I mean, I have the luxury of being a design curator in an encyclopedic museum. So it is intrinsically implied that it is art. To me, it is art regardless of whether it has a function or not. And I'm not embarrassed. I think that's amazing. And I think architecture is art. I think all these things that take creative impulses that work through challenges, these are ideas that artists and creative thinkers make. So I'm not really as hung up on whether it's artist, and maybe that makes me the most like rebellious of everyone on the panel. I'm not hung up in whether it's art and design, whether you're an artist, a designer, a maker, a crafts person. I'm interested in whether the idea is compelling, the intention is there, and it sparks and inspires others to see it. That's why we present it. And so I think it's interesting to talk about the different layers in making. Like when I'm listening to you make, the idea of the user and the function varies, both on the pieces you make, whether it's a commission, whether it's something you're making for yourself, whether you're experimenting with ideas. Those are all within the maker. And then we who get to see it, that change, we don't always know that. I don't always know why. Did my mic just go? Shut her down. You don't always know why. And I think that's the hard part in seeing stuff, is that all those layers, all these stories you're telling behind objects aren't always evident. So what is somebody else getting from them? And does somebody else care whether it's a chair or not? It's a shelf that functions or not? Are we putting that on ourselves to make that matter?
I keep thinking of this like amazing Rochelle Feinstein quote, and I was reading this interview with her the other day, and she said that a student asked her, when does something become art? And her response was like, when it's consumed. And that she didn't mean like necessarily purchased, but when it's seen, for example. And I liked that so much because it does really take the pressure off of like the person making the thing to decide what it is. Because I agree, it's not really up to us.
I once asked a teacher a similar question, like when do you know if you sold out? And he said, well, you'll know. Probably the same answer. When does it become art? You'll know. But then I asked another one the same question, and he said, well, the Bible says it's better to sow your seed in the belly of a whore than to spew it on the ground. Yeah, I looked up. I didn't know what to do with that. I looked up. He was gone. So. But yeah, you'll know, right?
No, I mean, I agree with so much of what you said, but I do think that words have meaning, and that we know that there is a distinction, and some of this is even reflected in the hierarchy that comes from trying to artify everything. So to try to even show and exhibit as art, and in some way then give it import in this way, right? To be like, no, design is great because it's like art. And design is its own thing and a separate thing. And there are possibilities for design's exhibition and for design's interaction and engagement that are not available in art. And that is not,
well, design.
and that's not for better or worse. Right?
Design, what we're talking about, is a trade. And it's where the craftsman was superseded by the machine, but the machine still needed to be directed. That's what we talk about, design. When Michelangelo did the Sistine Chapel, he referred to it as designs and cartoons. Well, this is the projection of how a project is going to be actuated. But we talk about it as a sort of cultural, economic signifier. But it's a thing, a process, and not to be mistaken.
I also sometimes feel like within the context of design, I can kind of hide a little more, hide myself a little more, and not really expose myself. It's like a kind of something I can choose almost, and then like more personally becomes. It feels less like a design, but I don't know. Design seems like it's such a function. All of this seems like a very comfortable place to be when you're making something, because maybe it's not considered emotional. That's kind of the way I feel or distinguish between the two. I don't know if you guys.
So you're saying that art conveys emotion?
For me, I think so. I mean, people have asked me this question before, like, do you think you're doing design or making art? And that's kind of what the first thing came to my mind was whether do I choose to make this part of me or not? And working, like being in school or working in an office, I was always kind of turning off part of myself to just like do the job. And that I was like, I'm designing. There's no doubt about that. And then when I started making my own work and then decided to, like, I was like, I have to talk about this piece as opposed to the other. I'm not just presenting. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with. I feel like for me, and at least in the way I work, is I will there's like a part of the process that is like design, and I make this like framework or a little literal frame, and I'm just like, all right, that's done, and then I like switch to the other part of my brain that's like, all right, now we can just like jab stuff in and like not really care about if this thing is gonna like fall apart because I already figured that out. And so I like do it and flip back and forth in my brain.
There's an aspect that we always talked about, and that's the connection of the heart and the hand and the ability to infuse spirit in these objects, in these paintings, whatever, and within the immediate history of art, we see the figurative receding with the abstract, so that these communications become, they say, well, I painted it all red because I was very emotional, instead of showing a guy stabbing the Sabine women or something. And so, hence we have these crossovers in ways to look at these things.
I think what's,
Did that
I
make
know our
sense?
time is, I think we're running,
Okay.
we're over
I think so, but
time.
you're not sure yet.
But I want to thank everyone, because I think what's really interesting in listening to all of this conversation is we're not a monolith of a community. We all have our own ideas. We all come to it with our own ideas. We all bring them, and that's what enriches the whole narrative. And that's what is going to, like to your point, what is going to continue to propel it forward. And I think it is really exciting to think that, the joke used to be when I was in grad school that decorative arts and design was everything that wasn't fine. And we were always relegated to second class. And we should just be thrilled to be invited. And my attitude has always been like, well, then we'll just make our own party and we'll write our own story. And I think that's what's, I hope, been exciting for the audience and for all of us, is that we are, I'm not going to quote Wood Smith, we're not works in progress, but we are progressing, we are evolving, and we are just, I think we're all trying to figure out as we move into this into this century, and the way people consume stuff and the way we make and the way technology evolves, that what our role is. And I think what's the most exciting is everybody is blazing new paths and are trying new things. And I think every time you move it forward, it is exciting. And so I'm really thrilled that we were allowed to come here and talk about this in this context, because I hope it added and enriched all of your days as it did mine. So I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Sarah.